We are the vanguard of a new era in digital storytelling, where technology and emotion finally become one. Experience the future of cinema through our neon-lit narratives and metallic, high-contrast visuals. Join the movement today. Hit that subscribe button and stay ahead of the curve.
I was not prepared for what my granddaughter handed me that morning. I thought I knew her. I thought I understood everything about her silence. I was wrong about all of it. My name is Gerald. I am 64 years old, and for the past 31 years, I have worked as a high school history teacher in Dayton, Ohio. I retired 3 years ago. My wife, Carol, passed away from cancer 7 years before that, and since then it has been just me in the house we bought together in 1987. 4 bedrooms, a yard with an oak tree she planted the year our son was born. I kept the bird feeder she loved. I kept everything exactly the way she left it, because some mornings the stillness of that house is the only thing that feels honest. My son is named Robert. He is 38 years old, and he works in finance. He married a woman named Diana 10 years ago. I tried to like Diana. I want to be clear about that. I genuinely tried. She was polished and careful with her words, and always brought a bottle of wine when they visited, but there was something behind her eyes that I could never quite read. Carol used to say that some people smile with their mouths, and some people smile with their whole face. Diana always smiled with just her mouth. They have one child together, a daughter named Lily. Lily is 9 years old, and she has not spoken a single word since she was 4.5. Not one word. Her doctors diagnosed her with selective mutism following what they called a significant emotional disruption. I never got a straight answer about what that disruption was. Robert told me the therapist said it was complex, that it could take years, that the best approach was patience and a calm environment and absolutely no pressure. Diana said the same things, almost word for word, which struck me as odd at the time. But I pushed that thought away. I loved Lily in the way you love someone who cannot tell you what they need. Quietly, carefully. I learned to read her eyes and her hands. When she was happy, she would pull gently on her left earlobe. When she was uncomfortable, she pressed both palms flat against her thighs. When she wanted to tell me something she could not say, she would look at me for a long moment, then look away, then look back, like she was testing whether I was paying attention. I was always paying attention. I just did not always understand what she was showing me. Robert called me on a Thursday evening in early October. He said he and Diana had been invited on a 10-day cruise through the Caribbean for Diana's colleague's 40th birthday celebration. He said they had already looked into arrangements for Lily, but that every option felt wrong. He paused in a way that told me he was about to ask me something he already knew the answer to. I said yes before he finished the sentence. They dropped Lily off at my house on a Saturday morning. Diana carried in a suitcase, a backpack, a tote bag full of art supplies, and a printed document that was 4 pages long. It had Lily's daily schedule, her dietary restrictions, a list of approved television shows, emergency contact numbers, her therapist's phone number and office hours, and a section at the end titled Important Notes that was mostly reminders not to push Lily to speak and not to draw attention to her silence in any way. I had spent 5 years with this child. I did not need 4 pages of instructions, but I thanked Diana and said I would read through everything carefully. Diana hugged Lily in a way that looked like a hug but felt, watching it, like something performed for an audience. Lily stood very still during it. She did not pull on her earlobe. Robert knelt down and kissed Lily on the top of her head. He looked tired in a way I had been noticing more often lately. He hugged me and said he would call when they landed in Miami. I walked them out to the car. Diana gave me one last smile, the mouth-only kind, and then they were gone. I stood on the porch for a moment after their car turned the corner. October in Ohio. The oak tree had gone orange, and the neighbor's dog was barking somewhere down the street, and the air smelled like leaves and rain. I breathed it in. 10 days with Lily. I had been looking forward to it since the moment he asked. I turned around, and she was standing in the doorway. She was looking at me the way she sometimes did. The long look, then away, then back. I said, "Well, sweetheart, how about some breakfast?" She nodded. She followed me inside. I made scrambled eggs and toast and cut up a pear the way she liked, in thin slices fanned out on the plate. She sat at the kitchen table and ate with the focused attention she gave everything. Lily approached meals like she was studying them. I sat across from her with my coffee and the newspaper, and for a while the kitchen was quiet in the comfortable way that only certain silences can be. Then I heard it. A voice, small and careful, like someone testing the temperature of water before stepping in. Grandpa. I put the newspaper down very slowly. I was afraid that if I moved too fast, it would stop. I was afraid I had imagined it. I looked at Lily. She was looking directly at me. Her hands were flat on the table. Her eyes were serious in a way that made her look much older than 9. She said, "Don't drink the coffee Diana made this morning." I stared at her. She said, "She put something in it. She put something in your coffee. She left it in the blue thermos in the refrigerator. She told Dad it was a special blend she picked up for you as a thank you gift. It's not." The kitchen felt very quiet, the kind of quiet that rings. I said, "Lily." My voice came out lower than I expected. "How long have you been able to talk?" She looked at her plate. She picked up a slice of pear and set it back down. Then she looked at me again and said, "A long time." I had a blue thermos in my refrigerator. Diana had brought it in with the rest of Lily's things and handed it to me herself, smiling, saying she had found this wonderful small batch roast from a shop near their house, and she thought I would love it. I had thanked her. I had put it in the refrigerator. I had planned to try it with breakfast. I got up from the table and went to the refrigerator. The blue thermos was on the second shelf. I picked it up and looked at it. I set it on the counter. I did not open it. I went back to the table and sat down and looked at my granddaughter. I said, "Lily, I need you to tell me everything." She pressed her palms flat against her thighs for a moment. Then she straightened up and looked at me with those serious old eyes, and she began to talk. She talked for a long time. She told me that she had stopped speaking when she was 4, because her mother had told her that if she said the wrong thing to the wrong person, something very bad would happen to their family. She had not fully understood what that meant at 4. Only that her mother's voice, when she said it, was different from her normal voice. The way a dog's growl is different from its bark. So she stopped. She had been a careful child. She kept her silence like a held breath. Over the years, she had come to understand more. She understood that her father did not always know what her mother was doing. She understood that her mother had a way of doing things that looked like one thing from the outside, but were something else entirely on the inside. She told me that the word her mother used most often, in the quiet conversations Lily was not supposed to be able to hear, was the word inheritance. I felt something cold move through my chest. She told me that 6 weeks ago, sitting outside her mother's home office with a book open on her lap, she'd heard her mother on the phone. The conversation was about me, about my house, about what my house was worth and what would happen to it, about a document that needed my signature, about how, if I was not capable of handling my own affairs, the process would be simpler. She told me she did not know what all of it meant, but she knew it was about hurting me, and she had spent 6 weeks trying to figure out what to do, and when she watched her parents walk out the front door that morning, she made a decision. I sat very still for a long moment after she finished. Then I said, "You have been carrying all of this by yourself." She looked at me and pulled gently on her left earlobe. I reached across the table and covered her small hand with mine, and I said, "You are the bravest person I know." Her eyes went bright the way eyes do when someone is trying very hard not to cry. I did not drink the coffee in the blue thermos. I put it in a paper bag and set it carefully in the garage. Then I sat back down at the kitchen table with Lily, and I asked her quiet, specific questions, and she answered every one of them in that small, careful voice, and I listened the way I had been listening for 5 years, only now I could finally hear. She told me about a name she had heard, a man her mother called on a different phone than the one she usually used. She told me about conversations that happened behind closed doors that she had learned to reconstruct from partial sentences and tone of voice. She told me that 3 months ago, something had been added to my food at a family dinner. She described watching her mother do something to the dish she was preparing to bring to me, something small and quick, when she thought no one was in the kitchen. Lily had been in the kitchen. She had been sitting behind the island reading, which was where she often sat because adults frequently forgot she was there. I thought about how I had felt at that dinner, how I had gone home and slept for 11 hours and woken up dizzy and strange. I had told Robert I thought I was coming down with something. He had told me to rest. I thought about the other times I had felt that way in the past year. The times I had chalked up to age, to grief, to the ordinary difficulty of being a body that had been in use for 64 years. I went to my study and I sat at my desk and I made a phone call to my doctor's office. I asked to be worked in that day. I told them I needed a comprehensive blood panel. They heard something in my voice and they told me to come in at 2. Then I made another call to my attorney, a man named Frank who had handled Carol's estate and who I trusted completely. I told him I needed to meet with him as soon as possible. He asked if Monday morning would work. I said I needed it to be today. He said he could see me at 4:30. I sat at my desk for a moment after I hung up. Through the doorway I could see Lily, still at the kitchen table, drawing in one of her sketchbooks. She had been drawing since she could hold a pencil. Her drawings were detailed and precise, and sometimes unsettling in the way that children's artwork can sometimes be, catching something true in a way adults have learned to avoid. She looked up and saw me watching her. She did not smile exactly, but something in her face softened. I said, "We're going to figure this out, okay?" She nodded. I said, "And later I want you to teach me some of those drawing techniques, because I've been watching you do that cross-hatching thing for 2 years and I still cannot do it right." She almost smiled at that. Almost. The blood work came back 3 days later. My doctor called me himself, which is not what happens when everything is normal. He said he wanted to talk through the results with me in person, and could I come in Thursday? His voice had the particular, careful quality of someone who is preparing to say something difficult. I went in Thursday morning, and he sat across from me and told me that my results had shown traces of a compound called thallium. He said it was a heavy metal. He said it had legitimate industrial uses and was sometimes used as a pesticide, but that it had no business being in a person's bloodstream. He said the levels suggested what he called repeated low-dose exposure over an extended period. He said we had caught it at a stage where the damage was significant but treatable. He said I needed to begin treatment immediately. He also said he was required to report it. I told him I understood. I told him I understood. I told him I had already been in contact with my attorney. I told him that when the necessary people came to speak with me, I would be prepared to cooperate fully. Driving home from that appointment, I pulled into the parking lot of a hardware store and sat in my car for a long time. The sky was gray and flat, and the trees along the street had mostly dropped their leaves by then, the way October becomes November before you notice. I sat there and thought about Carol. I thought about what she would have said. She had always seen people more clearly than I did. She had never trusted Diana, not from the beginning, but she had never said it outright because she loved Robert, and she understood that some things a mother has to keep to herself. I wondered if she had suspected. I wondered if she had worried about me in the years since she had been gone. I drove home. Lily was with a neighbor I trusted, a retired school teacher named Helen, who had known Lily since she was small. I had told Helen that Lily was going through a bit of a breakthrough with her communication, and to just let her lead. Helen had texted me that morning to say that Lily had asked her about her cat, an elderly tabby named Winston, and that she had cried a little bit about it. I let myself into the house and sat in the chair by the window where I could see the oak tree, and I let myself feel what I'd been not feeling for 3 days. The weight of it. The years of it. The dinners and the holidays and the phone calls and the handshakes. All of it was something underneath that I had not been able to name. My own son, who I did not believe had understood what was being done, but who had also not looked too closely at things he perhaps did not want to see. That was its own grief, and I had to sit with it. What Robert knew and did not know came out slowly, over the following weeks. His attorney and mine worked through it together. The picture that emerged was of a man who had allowed himself to be managed. Diana had kept him at a careful distance from me. She had shaped his understanding of my health, my state of mind, my wishes. There was a document, prepared by an attorney Diana had found herself, that was designed to establish power of attorney in her name based on a pattern of documented cognitive concerns. Those concerns were documented in a private file she kept. The file contained a manufactured record of incidents, conversations, lapses, worries. Robert knew the file existed. He had not read it carefully. He told investigators that Diana had said it was just a precaution, that she was worried about me and wanted to be prepared, and that he had believed her because she had never given him a reason not to. He said that looking back, he had given her many more reasons than he realized. Diana was arrested on a Tuesday morning. Lily and I were at the kitchen table when my attorney called to tell me it was done. I thanked him and sat quietly for a moment, and then I looked at Lily and told her. She already knew something was happening. She had been watching me on phone calls for 2 weeks with the same careful attention she gave everything. When I told her, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked me if her father was going to be okay. I told her the truth, which was that I did not know yet, but that I believed he was a good man who had made a serious mistake, and that good men who make serious mistakes sometimes find their way back if they are willing to do the work. She thought about that. Then she said, "Is he going to be in trouble?" I said, "Some, but not the same kind of trouble." She nodded slowly. She looked out the window at the oak tree. She said, "I want to see him." I said, "I know, and you will. I promise you that." Robert called me that evening. He had spoken with the investigators earlier that day. He was not under arrest. He was cooperating fully. His voice on the phone was different from any version of his voice I had heard in years. The managed quality was gone. He sounded like someone standing in a room with all the furniture removed. Seeing for the first time how large the room actually was. He said, "Dad, I am so sorry." I said, "I know." He said, "I didn't know all of it. I need you to believe that." I said, "I believe you didn't know all of it." I said, "I believe you didn't know all of it. I also believe you knew more than you looked at. And we are going to have to talk about that. Not tonight. But we are going to have to talk about it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Is Lily okay?" I said, "Lily is more than okay. Robert, your daughter has been talking to me for 2 weeks." The sound he made was not quite crying, and not quite something else. It was the sound of something long held finally being released. He said, "Can I talk to her?" I carried the phone to the kitchen where Lily was doing homework at the table. I held it out to her and said her father wanted to speak with her. She looked at the phone for a moment. Then she reached out and took it with both hands. I walked to the window and looked at the oak tree and gave them their privacy. I could hear her voice behind me, small and careful, finding its way, asking questions, answering them. The occasional silence that was not silence at all, but just thought making room for itself. The treatment for thallium exposure takes time. There were months of it. There were days that were harder than others, and days that were genuinely okay, and some days that surprised me with how ordinary they were. How much of ordinary life continues, even through the difficult parts. Lily came to several of my appointments. She sat in the waiting room with a book or a sketchbook, and when I came out, she always looked up immediately, checking my face before anything else. I learned, in those months, that selective mutism is not always what it appears to be. Lily's therapist, a patient woman named Dr. Okafor, who had gentle eyes and an office full of plants, explained to us that a child placed under sustained threat and pressure can suppress communication as a genuine survival response. She said that Lily had made a rational choice with the tools available to a 4-year-old, and that choice had protected her in ways that were real. And now the work was to help her understand that protection was no longer necessary. Lily took to that work with the same focused attention she brought to everything. Within 2 months, she was speaking freely at home. Within 4 months, she was speaking at school. First in whispers to a teacher she trusted, then in full voice to her class during a presentation she had asked to give about migratory birds. Her teacher called me afterward and told me about it. I had to sit down. Robert and I had our conversation. We had several of them actually spread across many weeks, and they were not easy and they were not complete, the way real conversations rarely are. He had to learn to look at himself without the careful framing Diana had always provided. I had to learn, again, the difference between the truth I needed to say and the truth I needed to hold for another time. We are still working at it. We may always be working at it. I've come to think that this is not a sign that something is broken, but rather a sign that we are still trying, and trying, in my experience, is most of what love actually is. Diana entered a plea agreement in March. I will not go into the details of the sentencing, except to say that the law took it seriously, and that I did not feel the satisfaction I expected to feel when it was over. I felt tired, mostly. And then, beneath the tiredness, something quieter. Something that might have been, slowly, release. It is spring now. The oak tree has come back the way it always does, green and extravagant. Lily spent last weekend with me, and we sat on the back porch on Saturday afternoon, and she drew and I read. And at some point, she set down her pencil and said, "Grandpa, do you think Grandma Carol knew about me? That I could understand things, I mean." I thought about that. I said, "I think she knew you were paying attention. She used to say you had the oldest eyes she'd ever seen on a child. She said it like it was the best compliment she could think of." Lily was quiet for a moment. She looked at the tree. She said, "I wish I had gotten to talk to her." I said, "Me too, sweetheart." She picked up her pencil again. She worked on her drawing for a while. Then she held it up for me to see. It was the oak tree, done in precise cross-hatching, every branch accounted for. The new spring leaves rendered in careful detail. In the upper right corner of the paper, very small, she had drawn a bird sitting on a high branch. A detail I would have missed if she had not held it up just so. I looked at it for a long time. She said, "You can have it if you want." I said, "I very much want it." She tore it carefully from the sketchbook and set it on the table between us. I picked it up and held it the way you hold something you know you will keep for the rest of your life. Later that evening, after I'd driven Lily home and kissed her on the top of her head and watched her go inside, I drove back to my house and let myself in and went to the window where I could see the oak tree in the dark. I stood there for a while. The house was quiet the way it is always quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than it used to be. Less like absence, more like the space between one breath and the next, which is not emptiness at all, but the body reminding itself that it is still here, still going, still capable of beginning again. Lily's drawing is framed now, hanging in my study next to a photograph of Carol. The bird in the upper right corner is the same species as the ones Carol used to watch from the kitchen window every morning. I recognized it only after I had the drawing up on the wall for several days. I do not think it was an accident. I think my granddaughter has been paying attention for a very long time, and some of what she has seen she kept safe until she knew it was time to share it. I am glad she shared it with me. I do not know what I would have done without her. I do not want to know.